consumer spending in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It got as low as 35% a few years ago. Now it's up to 39%. At the start of the reform and opening, it was 50%. 50% of total demand was household consumption, and the rest was investment and government
Mm-hmm.
current spending,
Mm-hmm.
plus net exports. And furthermore, this is partly driven by Chinese households saving a very large
Yes.
amount.
Yeah.
And that is, it's partly cultural, but there's good reasons for this because of the high cost of education
Mm-hmm.
and healthcare
Mm-hmm.
and
Housing.
retirement.
Yeah.
So people save a lot. This creates a demand problem, as Keynes
Mm-hmm.
explained many years ago.
Yeah.
So the state has dealt with this contradiction. I actually wrote a paper about this with a Chinese colleague a few
Uh-huh.
years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah. The growth model of China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Problems in China's growth.
Mm-hmm.
First, by a focus on investment and exports
Mm-hmm.
to keep demand growing, but then after the 2008 crisis, exports could no longer grow so fast
Mm-hmm.
because the rest of the world stagnated.
Mm-hmm.
So investment is leading growth. It's 43% of GDP. That's too high,
Mm-hmm.
and that causes excess capacity,
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true.
and that's a hard problem to solve
Mm-hmm.
because a more reasonable, a balanced Chinese economy would have about 50% household consumption,
Mm-hmm.
30% investment, and 20% public spending. And there's a lot of talk about basing China's growth on the domestic market,
Mm-hmm.
but it's hard to do
Yes.
with so much inequality. And it's hard to reduce inequality because of the economic and political power of the wealthy.
Yeah.
That's a big problem. Then there's the environmental
Mm-hmm.
problem. It's very hard to solve.
Mhm. Yes. And now China is also trying to create some, new, maybe international, can I say, need by this Belt and Road Initiative.
Mhm.
Yes. And would that work, besides, trying to create more domestic demand?
Yeah, that I think that's part of the
Mhm.
strategy for keeping the economy growing,
Mm-hmm.
to engage in a lot of infrastructure spending in other countries,
Mm-hmm. But
which keeps Chinese infrastructure building firms operating, and it generates demand for Chinese products. And it can help the countries where they...
But some argues now there's so many problems. Maybe this money they go there for political reasons, but not for economic reasons, and much of money is wasted, or you cannot get back.
Well, it's true, there can be problems, but potentially this can benefit both China's economy and the other countries.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is an attractive program for many.
Yeah, but it raises concerns on the international stage, right?
Well, the U.S. is promoting the
Mhm.
claim that, this will work out very badly.
Mm-hmm.
It's Chinese imperialism, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
It's not clear.
Mm.
There is a potential for mutual benefit.
Yeah.
In those, I think at this point, China is different from the Western
Mm-hmm.
capitalist powers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think China's economy does not produce a economic drive
Mm-hmm.
to benefit at the expense of other places.
Mm-hmm.
I think China can pursue a win-win
Mm-hmm.
policy of mutually beneficial
Yeah.
economic relations,
Mm-hmm.
which it's very hard for capitalist countries to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But do you think it's a good direction that maybe China will help countries maybe along the Belt and Road, but it will also, I think, will promote this Chinese model that you could have a strict political regime with advanced economy. Do you think
Do you think China is trying to export that model by force? I don't
not by
see it.
force, but will support this regime?
Well, they hold it up
Yeah.
as a desirable model.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, President Trump is making China's political model look good.
Yes.
Compared to President Trump,
Mm-hmm.
President Xi Jinping looks very good.
Mm-hmm.
He's reasonable. He's wants to negotiate, etc. But I don't think China's political model is very attractive at this stage to
Mm-hmm.
the rest of the world, most of the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best political model does involve empowering the people.
Yes.
And China's model, power is very centralized.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be effective for economic growth, but it has other problems.
Yeah, that's a problem here. That I know that you have this area of participatory planning.
Exactly.
Yes. But as we see from the example here, the Soviet Union and China, it looks as a tendency, to the concentration of power, and you just can't stop it. With rapid economic growth and the power become more and more concentrated. So how will you, achieve this, as you say, this participatory, planning in the view of people, not in the capitalists, but not also in the bureaucracies, these high-ranking officials.
Well, I don't think this the current developments are inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gorbachev's reform plan
Mm-hmm.
did call for a reform of socialism
Mm-hmm.
that would empower ordinary people,
Mm-hmm.
and he was defeated by forces in the Soviet Union that didn't want that,
Mm-hmm.
that favored capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
If you read my book, you know
From the
analysis.
elites.
But that was just the first wave of
Mhm.
efforts to build socialism.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
My throat has been affected by the pollution.
Oh yeah, in China, that's another problem. China.
So I think we're again in a period where millions of people around the world are feeling oppressed
Mm-hmm.
by their conditions,
Mm-hmm.
and that represents the hope
Mm-hmm.
for changes that would empower ordinary people.
Mm-hmm.
The same conditions that are producing right-wing nationalism are also producing a rebirth
Mm-hmm.
of the socialist movement.
Mm-hmm.
In the U.S. and in the UK,
Yes.
there is growing support for socialist directions
Mm-hmm.
of change. So I think that represents the hope for something better.
Mm-hmm. I thought I don't know if you've done research on it, but these days the blockchain technology is quite popular. Everyone's talking about it. Then do you think someone think that blockchain? We don't talk about technology details, but someone think that the thinking behind it is kind of like socialist because everyone could take part in it and everyone's equal and they're sharing and there's no centralized control. Do you think there are some similarities or actually in the opposite direction?
I hate to say this again,
Yeah.
but it's too soon to say.
Yes, I know.
It's very hard to predict the effects of a new technology.
Yeah, but if we don't think it's visible now,
And
we're just
some
thinking.
people say
Yeah.
it's easy to game
Mm.
blockchain. Certain groups could gain control of it. They could place little things in it that would
Mhm.
enable certain groups to benefit at the expense of others. And I don't know,
Yeah,
and
but
no one knows really yet.
Mhm.
But I think one can assess technologies that have been around a while.
Mhm.
And what we have seen in the last several decades is new technologies in information processing and communications
Mhm.
that make it possible
Mhm.
to have a planning system in which millions of people participate.
Mhm.
This is much more possible than it would have been 30 years ago.
Mhm.
That you could have many people, consumers, workers, all have input into decisions about production,
Mhm.
what will be produced, how it will be produced. The market is not the only
Mhm.
mechanism that
Yeah.
can convey information.
Yes.
The problem with the market is the market creates prices which contain information, but it's not accurate information.
Mhm.
It's very bad information often.
Mhm.
If people like a product, the price will go up. Okay. But if a product causes environmental problems, that's not reflected in the price. So if oil is cheap, people will use it, even though it will eventually destroy civilization. That's not accurate information.
Yes.
If prices are low because workers are very exploited, people will buy it, even though that's not rational information. if the consumers knew
Mm-hmm.
that this product was the result of super exploited labor, maybe they would act differently.
And just talk about this, many people now are supportive of socialism, both in the United States and UK, and we see the support for Sanders in the election 2016.
He's the most popular U.S. political figure.
Yes.
Have you seen these reports? And in the last public opinion poll I saw,
No.
Sanders had 53% positives. The only leading American political figure who had more than half.
Mm-hmm. So what about the supporters of Sanders now under Trump's administration? Are they satisfied? Do you think they have changed their views, or do they still maybe
Trump is not popular in the U.S. now.
Mm-hmm.
His support has ranged recently from 35 to 40%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So these people under this current administration, so they're not satisfied with what Trump is doing now.
Well, he has a hardcore base
Mm-hmm.
who, no matter what he does,
Mm-hmm.
they will support him.
Yeah.
Who supported him even though, he abuses women, he
Mhm.
is racist.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who will support him to the end,
Mm-hmm.
but they're a minority.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, the Zizek, he has written an article just on the Marx 200th anniversary, and he
I'm sorry, who is written?
no, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's this the Slovenia philosopher, the Marxist.
From what country?
Slovenia,
Slovenia.
yeah.
Oh,
Zizek.
yeah, I know who you mean.
I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's kind of hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just finished an article in the Marx 200 anniversary, and it raised the question that who is now the main body of the can I say the revolution? Is that the workers or students or minorities? These people now are sparse, and they're not as when Marx read about it that they are a majority of the society, and they have nothing to lose. So now, who could do this kind of things? Who are the main body of the revolution?
Actually, I'm not sure workers were the majority when Marx wrote.
Okay.
They were increasing.
Mm-hmm.
But when Marx wrote, in much of the world, peasants were the majority.
Mm-hmm.
There were probably more farmers than workers in the U.S. at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But the trend of capitalism has been for the working class understood as those who can live only by selling their labor power.
Mm-hmm.
It's kept increasing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a majority. It's a big majority
Mm-hmm.
in the developed capitalist countries.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more diverse.
Mm-hmm.
The manufacturing workers are a smaller percentage
Mm-hmm.
than in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And so more of them are, there are more so-called white-collar workers, clerical workers who are not always highly paid, service workers of various kinds. Marx was very clear that workers who produce services rather than goods,
Mm-hmm.
if it's in a framework of production for profit, they're exploited workers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more difficult, when most of the workers were in large enterprises producing goods,
Mm-hmm.
relatively unskilled, it tended to produce socialist consciousness more than today.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the working class, broadly defined, is still the basis of a transition to socialism.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, if you look at the actual transitions to socialism,
Mm-hmm.
it was not exactly the model that Marx proposed. In Russia, the main base of the revolution was the industrial proletariat,
Mm-hmm.
but a key factor was the support by the peasants
Mm-hmm.
for the Bolshevik seizure of power. In China, it was mainly based in the peasants.
Yes.
In Cuba, the revolution was supported by the industrial workers, but it was mainly a small group of guerrillas that were able to take power
Mm-hmm.
against the dictatorship, supported by pretty much most the whole population in Cuba, because the dictatorship was very repressive. So I think a transition to socialism in the developed countries will emerge from the working class, but with a broad coalition of many groups, minorities, oppressed minorities, young people without a clear class position yet, who are concerned about environmental problems, those who are concerned about the way capitalism brings war, so peace activists, the women's movement. I think a kind of a coalition of progressive groups will be the basis of transition.
So if in a parallel world that if in a parallel world that Sanders maybe win this election, and
If in the what?
I mean, it's just a thought experiment that if Sanders win the election, so what will be the maybe 2008 look like? Will that still be American-U.S. U.S.-China trade war? Will it still be, or was something different?
Okay, well, it's quite possible that Sanders will be president in 2021. The U.S. capitalist class would do whatever it could to stop him. But they were not able to stop Trump. So maybe they cannot stop Sanders. Sanders is not really a socialist in the sense that I mean it. He will not struggle to get rid of capitalism. But his program is for a social democratic form of capitalism, in which all workers are guaranteed a job, wages will rise, the state will promote higher wages, more generous social programs for workers, and I think a more peaceful foreign policy. I think it's possible President Sanders would initiate a more cooperative relationship with China, although I think the real fear of the U.S. capitalist class about Sanders is he would not promote the needs of U.S. imperialism. You know, Sanders' early political activism was in the peace movement. The big business is very worried about this. They don't want a former peace activist as the head of U.S. But, you know, we've learned that capitalists don't always get what they want.
Yeah.
So real socialism is not on the agenda at this time. There is not a powerful movement that is demanding abolishing capitalism yet. But we might see, with President Sanders and with the election of many progressive Democrats to Congress, a social democratic form of capitalism, but different from the post-World War II era, in that it would have to have as a major focus a green, sustainable economy.
Yes.
Which is difficult to achieve under capitalism, but maybe some progress can be made in that direction.
Okay. Yeah, I think the time is. Yeah, maybe it's.
Well, we never do.
Yeah, the best thing I'm curious about is that he's always talking about economic reform. You know, he said in his address speech that he will focus more on internal development. But he said already four times. Every time he said that, but he seems cannot always reach this goal. So what do you think about it?
It even predates Putin. Under Yeltsin, there was always the promise that now we will reform the economy. It's never happened.
Yes.
And there's a reason.
Yeah. But do you think it's because
the economic policy of the Putin regime has been neoliberal.
Yes, because he just assigned Kudling as his new economic advisor, right?
I'm sorry, who? I didn't
because
Kudling?
Kudling, right? Because Medvedev is still the prime minister, but he assigned the economic part to Kudling. Yeah.
Well, there's a reason for this. You know, the new oligarchs. The Russian economy is an oligarchic capitalism, and the most powerful capitalists are in the raw materials and metals sector, and they don't want a redevelopment of Russia's industry.
Yeah.
And high tech. They don't want this. They make huge profits from the raw materials and metals based system, and that is the economic power in Russia. So there's always been talk we need to develop high tech, but it never happens. I think the Putin regime on the global level is progressive to a certain extent, and that's because of the contradictions between Russia and the U.S.
Yeah.
When Russia, when state socialism was dismantled and capitalism built in Russia, U.S. and West European capital were not allowed into the most profitable segments. The new Russian capitalists got the oil, the
Yes.
natural gas,
Mhm.
the metals.
Mhm.
And this is the reason for the hostility of the U.S. to Russia. They regard it as an independent capitalist state that will not follow U.S. orders and not allow U.S. capital into the most profitable activities. But domestically, it's a raw materials-based capitalism, and it's very repressive. And working people are suffering in Russia; they're not doing well. So domestically, it's a very reactionary regime.
Mhm. But do you see any hope in this new term that?
No,
No.
I don't see
Okay.
any basis.
But so I think.
I've heard some Chinese scholars say, well, really it's a form of socialism in Russia. This is wishful thinking.
Yes, and I think Putin is, but I think Putin itself, he is facing a dilemma that Russia cannot leave without him now, but as long as he stays in power, the country cannot do some very thorough political reform, and it's hard for it to have a better relations with the West.
I think only the left can lead to positive changes in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
The Communist Party won the 1996 presidential election in Russia.
Yes.
It was stolen by Yeltsin.
Yeah, by Yeltsin and also by TVs. They have this.
I mean, there were many levels of the explanation of the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
In February of 1996,
Mm-hmm.
Yeltsin's public support was 9%,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and Zyuganov's was in the low 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And, by the end, through various
Propaganda on
maneuvers,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
they were close.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe, many people believe that Zyuganov got more votes
Mm-hmm.
than Yeltsin. But they faked the results.
Yeah.
At the end of the Soviet period, the votes were counted accurately.
Mm-hmm.
But in post-Soviet so-called democratic Russia,
Yeah.
the votes are not counted accurately.
Yeah, that's the saying that in Russia it doesn't matter who votes, but it's a matter who counts the votes. Yeah.
Right, and if the Communist Party had come back to power, I think Russia's trajectory would have been much better.
Yeah, but so far it looks not good because Putin's supporting, I think it's 67%,
Putin,
76%.
yeah, but
Yeah.
the polls show he has
Mhm.
much stronger support than that even.
Mm-hmm.
He's very popular
Mm-hmm.
for various reasons.
Yeah.
Authoritarian, right-wing nationalist leaders can be popular.
Mm-hmm.
The state. I have strengthened the state. We stand up. No longer are we being stepped on.
Mhm.
We fight back.
Yeah.
This is popular with people,
Yes.
even if they can't afford a decent life.
Mm-hmm. And did you notice that there's a strange trend that Stalin is becoming more popular in Russia now?
I know.
Yeah, that's.
Well,
Mm.
the Soviet Union made big economic advances under
Mhm.
Stalin. On the other hand, he executed almost all of the leaders of the Bolshevik Revolution and
Mhm.
many innocent working people and
Mhm.
intellectuals.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think Stalin was a positive figure. Stalin also weakened the
Mhm.
Soviet military on the
Mhm.
eve of World War II
Mm-hmm.
by executing many generals
Mm-hmm.
and by refusing to see that Nazi Germany was preparing to attack. All the intelligence was saying they're preparing to attack, and Stalin wouldn't believe it and took no steps to prepare. As a result, the Germans went 1,000 miles into
Mhm.
the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Putin now is trying. I think he's trying to bring the Stalins back. He's like landing.
He wants to bring the bad features of Stalin without the good, because it was socialism under
Mhm.
Stalin.
Mm-hmm.
So he wants to bring back, strong state
Mm-hmm.
and a strong hand,
Mm-hmm.
but not the positive features of socialism, of working
Mhm.
people,
Mm-hmm.
gaining the economic fruits
Mm-hmm.
of their labor.
Yeah, but he's trying to. I think he's trying to get away with the memory of Lenin, right? He's doing something, to.
Really? Has he been talking about Lenin?
I'm not talking about it. It's just like do something like in trying to to speak low of Lenin but speak high of Stalin. I think what he's doing now. I don't know.
Well, I think Lenin was a very positive figure, but not Stalin.
Mm-hmm.
There were many brilliant and impressive leaders of the Russian Revolution. This is
Mhm.
normal.
Mhm.
Great revolutions always produce
Mhm.
very impressive figures. It was true of the French Revolution, the American Revolution,
Mhm.
the Chinese Revolution. Of all the leaders of the Bolshevik Revolution, Stalin was the worst.
Mhm.
I mean, the worst ended up in charge. It was very unfortunate
Mhm.
for the Soviet people and for socialism,
Mhm.
because it created a stain
Mhm.
on socialism that millions of people were executed.
I talk with many Russians. What I feel very strange and not strange. It's I think it's typical of them is that although maybe people outside think their now economics bad and their foreign relations bad, but they're very optimistic. They think they're still a big country and they could
Well, they are a big country.
yeah, they're a
very
big country,
able
but they're not
people.
strong anymore, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because the neoliberal
Mhm.
policies of the oligarchic regime
Mhm.
is causing the majority to suffer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's people from upper hand. They're still enjoying this big country, but
You know that in 1998,
Mhm.
when the Russian financial crisis happened,
Mhm. Yeah.
My co-author Fred Weir,
Mhm.
and at that time the Communist Party and their allies had a majority in the Duma.
Mhm.
Yeltsin started to negotiate for his resignation,
Mhm.
with the condition that he be granted assured of no prosecution.
Mhm.
Fred Weir was a friend of the pilot of one of the top oligarchs,
Mhm.
and that oligarch told the pilot,
Which
to-
which oligarch?
I don't remember which one.
Mhm.
That oligarch told the pilot to go down to the airport and get his airplane ready. The oligarchs were getting ready to flee,
Mhm.
but the Communist Party, there was no Lenin
Mhm.
in the Communist Party, and they let Yeltsin remain in office
Mhm.
and imposed a progressive prime minister.
Mhm.
What's his name? Primakov.
Mapukov, yes.
And the Communist Party figure was made the chief economic
Mhm.
figure. But Yeltsin laid low for 6 months, recovered, fired Primakov,
Yeah.
and survived.
Mhm. Yes.
Okay, well,
Mhm. Yeah.
it's
that's good.
10:30.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's really